Welcome to the Jazz Piano School podcast, episode number 272. My name is Brendan Lowe, creator and founder of Jazz Piano School. In this particular podcast episode, I'm going to be showing you an amazing practice exercise to improve your right hand improvisation, and also a 3-step system that you can use to create improvisational lines really at will over any progression, any tune, any place you want. If you're interested in going further with your jazz piano education, go to jazzpianoschool.com to look at our membership, buy any courses that you may want, and obviously you can find all the podcasts there, look at the weeks, and so much more. With that being said, let's dive right in. All right, so with your bebop lines, the equation of a bebop line or an improv line it's going to start out with an approach note, a bebop approach note. Now, I don't want to go too far into that today because there's lots of videos on bebop approach notes in the podcast, the membership, so on and so forth. But the way a line is constructed, let's say we're moving into a minor 7th chord, a 2-5-1. So on the downbeat of 4, the measure before, we might start our bebop approach. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 and 1. The bebop approach allows us to land on a chord tone to start our line. So it's like tension leading into our line. Right? Now what's happening here is that we essentially have a surrounding, bebop approach notes are called different things, enclosures, surrounding notes. We have this tension and release that's moving into the chord tone. Now, everything I did up until that point was pretty much diatonic. It wasn't pretty much, it was diatonic. It was all scalar motion. I'm just moving up my diatonic scale, just our C major scale, because we're in the key of C, this 2-5-1, D minor 7, G7, C major 7. Now, what happens at the end of the line there, right? What happens is that I'm adding in another bebop approach note, which is leading me into my next chord tone I want to fall on. Now, to start, if you're a beginner, even intermediate, even advanced players, I've heard some people don't do this that great. You want to be able to land on these chord tones and get that fundamentally sound before moving into really advanced things. Chord tone, I'm landing on the root. Chord tone. Chord tone, right? That last line didn't really have any bebop approach. I'm going to change that up, but so here's the root, 3rd, maybe something like that, right? So at the end, I landed on the 5th of the C major 7. So creating a line, there's different components that go into an improv line or constructing it and practicing it, as I'm going to get to in just a second. So our bebop approaches usually, for the most part, generally speaking, lead us into a new chord and are used to get into a new chord. They also serve as a gateway to lead us into the next chord tone, right? Chord tone, bebop approach, chord tone, chord tone. Now, before landing on those chord tones, every single time I used the bebop approach to get me into that because it created tension and then resolved into my chord tone. Let me speed it up, add some finesse to it, and you can kind of hear how this line sounds, okay? Not bad. Let me do a little slower. So I constructed that line based off of 3 very easy elements. A bebop approach to get us into our chord tone, scalar motion in the middle of the measure, right? Between beats 1 and 4, and then another bebop approach attached to get me into the next chord tone. 3 elements. So bebop approach, scalar motion, Bebop Approach. Bebop Approach. Now I should say the third element is the chord tone you're landing on. So the Bebop Approach is 1, the chord tone is element 2, and then my scalar motion to connect the rest of the line. Chord tone, chord tone, chord tone. Again, all connected with scalar motion and then a Bebop Approach to get me into that next chord tone. Now, the exercise that's so helpful that I've been giving to all my accelerator students and teaching everyone inside of Jazz Piano School is essentially exactly what I'm doing here. So obviously you need to learn about your Bebop Approach notes. There's a couple steps you need to take, right? And you should do them in this order. Chord tones. You need to know your chord tones through your 7th chords, right? The very first step to becoming a great improviser is being able to improvise just with your chord tones alone so that you know them like the back of your hand. I laughed because right when I said you need to know like the back of your hand, I hit a 9 by accident. But you should be able to solo over anything just using chord tones, right? Autumn Leaves. You should be able to take any tune and just make a solo with chord tones. That's step number 1. Step number 2, if you're able to do that, fundamentally speaking, moving on to your next step is be able to create scalar motion, diatonic scalar motion within whatever key the tune is in and connect your chord tones. So if I take a 2-5-1, I should be able to start on a chord tone and land on a chord tone for my next chord, and in between play scalar motion. And what I mean by scalar motion is just moving up and down the key center that you're in. So here, this 2-5-1 is the key of C. I'm just moving up and down using the C major scale. That's it. That's it. Right? I landed on the 3rd here. And then I landed on the 3rd again. And in between the chord tones, your scalar motion is moving up and down however you please. You can keep going up the whole time. Right? You just got to figure out the rhythmic pattern to land on those chord tones. And if you need to make a jump or a skip like a 3rd, obviously you've seen I've been doing that, do so. Right? So here I need to make a skip to land on this 7. Maybe I'll go back up. And that equaled out perfectly. I didn't need to jump or anything. It led me right on to the 5 of the C major 7. That's step number 2. Being able to solo through tunes diatonically while landing on chord tones. So if I were to use Autumn Leaves again. I'm just moving up and down scalar motion, right? Using the key center, but still landing on chord tones. That's step number 2. You should be able to do that with any tune. Now, step number 3, right, is incorporating now these bebop approaches to start to add tension and bebop sounds to our line, right? So instead of this, I might go. So I added a bebop approach, or so I'm adding the bebop approach in the beginning, connecting with scalar motion in the middle, and then adding another bebop approach in the end of the measure to get me into my next chord or my next chord tone, in this case, the F7. So again, if I start this on beat 4, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1. I didn't have to use a bebop approach on this end because I was falling right into it. Right? So here, right? That's what I played before. Sorry, I forgot. I didn't have to use that bebop approach there. But this should be an exercise if you're at this level. I mean, if you can do the 2 steps that I just taught you beforehand, now you're at this level. And at this level, the practice exercise you want to use to create lines is going to be as follows. Start with a bebop approach, play scalar motion or thirds. Mainly in jazz, you'll hear scalar motion or thirds, and then end with a bebop approach. So just take your 2 5/1s. Start with a bebop approach. That's a very advanced one. You don't have to use that, but you could, right? 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Check out the line I just created using this kind of just equation. It's a systematic equation to creating lines, right? Bebop approach I started with. Now, granted, you need to learn some things to make this happen, but once you do, these things really fall into place. 3 and 4 and 1. Now I'm using skips instead of scalar motion. So skips are perfectly acceptable. Thirds are really commonly used in jazz improv, right? So instead of scalar motion, I'm using thirds. I could use scalar motion too. I could do this. Now the chord scale above is a bebop approach. So when I do this, going up to that C is technically a bebop approach, so it still acts the same. Even though it's still a diatonic, it still works the same. But I could make a half step below approach here. Right? That gives a little bit more of a tension and release because it has a non-diatonic note. Anyway, this is your exercise to create lines using this system. Bebop approach. So I went up by thirds. I came down using scalar motion. Now I need to get myself into a chord tone, right? And I need to pick the chord tone first, D or B. Let's say I pick B. How do I get there using a bebop approach? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That mathematically fits with the rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. So that's how I could go back up to the D if I wanted to. Right? So I did another different approach to get me to the chord tone of the D. Now wherever you are around beat 3.5 or 4, 3 and or 4, you need to kind of decide what chord tone you're getting to. But this is a fantastic exercise. Work through your 2 5/1s. Try to combine lines that continuously flow through your chord tones by using a bebop approach to start the line, and in the middle to transition to the next chord tone. And in the middle, between the 2 bebop approaches, you just have scalar motion or thirds, right? So let's try a different one. Let's try a bebop approach to the 5 of the A minor 7. And you don't always have to target your chord tones in your mind. You can see where your hand falls. This is where the experimentation starts to happen. So maybe I go 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. That was kind of an interesting line because I used all the same bebop approaches. I used chord scale above to half step below to the chord tone 5. Right? Now, this is a stepping stone, right? Clearly, there's things missing. We're missing extensions. We're missing musicality. I haven't even talked about the bebop scale yet, right? Which includes a passing tone. But this is a fantastic exercise to start to really allow you to create improv lines through changes that sound fantastic, that sound like bebop, and will really start to work your fingers and fundamentally build the skills you need in your right hand to create that improvisational sound that everyone's looking for. All right? Work this scale a lot, work this exercise a lot through 2 5/1s, through tunes, through any progression, 1 4 3 6, 3 6 2 5. Start to comp with your left hand, rootless voicings, right? Turn on iReal Pro. Just use this a lot. I guarantee your improv will get so much better. Okay? Talk to you soon. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to go to jazzpianoschool.com to check out all of our free, amazing education, all of the free podcast blogs. We do have a membership if you're looking to take a next step forward with us, get access to over 1,000 different jazz piano videos, playbooks, mini courses, a main course curriculum, success path, and so much more. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at support@jazzpianoschool.com. I hope you have a wonderful day, and as always, happy practicing.